2000-ish, you were the people that advertisers wanted to reach. The reason that our show took hold was you were watching, and you were getting the folks that advertisers wanted to get their message in front of. So once again, God bless you. Thank you. I appreciate it very much. Everything's cruising along, doing good, wonderful, we're happy, and then the world comes to an end. And the phone stopped ringing, and it didn't ring for a year and a half. We didn't have as much as a conversation with anyone from any network about anything. Nobody's buying any new shows. My old co-producer, Toby Murphy, calls me and says, "You want to get in the news business? News is doing real good right now." I said, "No, thanks, I'm doing just fine." But, I was saved from having to become a greeter at Walmart by my old friend Paul Zazarine. Paul just came swooping in and said, "We're putting together a bunch of publications like the old Dobbs Publishing Group. They're called the Enthusiast Books. Would you like to come and be the editor of Pontiac Enthusiast?" And I said, "Let me think about it." "Yes." So I'm commuting daily from Tampa to Lakeland to do my Pontiac Enthusiast thing and getting to work with Paul every day. And I'm here to tell you that is like working, it's like being a tornado chaser. It really is. I mean, when he was happy and jolly, it was party time every place. But when he clouded up and started to rain, everybody dived for cover. Paul is a beautiful, beautiful man, and I miss him terribly. So, at any rate, thankfully working with Paul on Pontiac Enthusiast was a joy. It was a way to stay connected to you, stay connected to the hobby. I'm so grateful to every one of you who bought the shows, because right about that time we got into the home video business. And VHS on home videos and everything. I still can't believe people were paying $39 a piece for these things back then, but that was a budget price for VHS programs back then. So we're very thankful that everything's cruising right along. And after a while, because of the home video success, because of other things, the market started to open up a little bit. We got a call from another guy who said, "I'd like to be your agent now." He had been helping us with the home videos, and he said, "I have an in at the new Speed Channel." It so happens that this guy, Bob, who wanted to be our agent, was the college roommate of the vice president of programming at Speed Channel. They both graduated from Syracuse University in the same year. But, so I'm very, very thrilled. Yes, let's get back into conversation with these guys. I wish I could show you some of my early scripts that, every one of the shows, for a 22.5-minute show, I was writing 45 minutes of dialogue. So that's the curse and the joy of being an old Irish storyteller. There's never enough words to get your point across, as you could tell now. But anyway, what they did was now they would come along, they let us do some 1-hour specials. And I was just so very, very happy to finally get enough time, I thought, to be able to tell the story of a car.
It was conceived in the 50s, born in 1961, and within a year, they'd already written songs about it. It endured through decades as a symbol of everything the American car was all about, and everything the American driver wanted in a car. They called it Supersport, and it was the perfect American muscle car.
So we were just very, very happy that the network said, "Okay, you can do 6 half-hour shows, regular American muscle car shows, and then we will buy 6 1-hour shows from you for your 4th season." And these are the shows that we wound up doing for that year. And I was wrong. The scripts were still running an hour and a half long. I'm going to have to go back and cut them down again, because truly there is not enough words to describe our cars. So, but they also came back to us and said, "Would you like to try to spread your wings and get into something a slightly different groove?" And we said, "So what?" And they said, "How about something called America's Top 10 Car Commercials?" It's a countdown show, counting down the top 10 car commercials ever. And we thought, well, certainly we could be happy to do that. So I put together a blue ribbon panel consisting of myself, our announcer Ken Cooper, and Paul Zazarine. And we selected the top 10 car commercials of all time, and we actually got to do the show, and it aired once. Yeah. So, well, we tried. At any rate, so now, moving along, we're getting into the 5th season. There are still cars we want to do, but we're starting to get down to but lower than the halfway point in the whole barrel of muscle cars. When we started out, I didn't think we'd ever run out of muscle cars. Well, on the 5th season, we're thinking to ourselves, well, you know, there's room in this to maybe do something not just a muscle car, but maybe we can get to do some things like screaming small blocks. We could do something like, you know, the documentary on the life of Ed Cole. And I promise you that show could have been 2 hours. But so at any rate, and we also got to do the show that I think that I was actually born to do. My father, back in the 40s and early 50s, had a relationship with this icon of a guy over in Daytona Beach by the name of Smokey Eunuch, and I actually got to do a show on Smokey. We also got to do a show on 04 GTOs, by the way, and so I just had to throw that in. Thanks. I missed that car. At any rate, getting to do the show on Smokey Eunuch was really kind of a life goal for me. Got in touch with his daughter, and we put the show together. Went over to Daytona Beach and shot the whole thing in a day. And it kind of looks like, I just bite off a little chunk of it for you.
You know, he's one of the most innovative people and one of the fiercest competitors who ever picked up a wrench. This week, the American muscle car pays tribute to a giant in the automotive world, Smokey Eunuch. This is stock car racing today. It's the big show, but it wasn't always like this. When auto racing started in the good old USA, it was a real sandlot sport. Somehow racing survived its early years, cleaned up its act, and became more sophisticated, more high-tech. But it was a long, tough journey, and it took a multitude of people from all different walks of life to make it happen. Some of those people are very well known today. In fact, they're rich and famous. But some others who were there at the beginning and during the early years never became household names, except for the people they raced against. Yet their contribution to the sport did as much as anything to make American automobile racing what it is today. This is the story of one of those men, Smokey Eunuch, part racing legend, part genius, part obsessive-compulsive personality. Smokey Eunuch was a pioneer, an innovator, and one of American auto racing's most important figures.
Well, Smokey was a tremendous contributor to the performance scene. It was what he would do. I mean, you know, he just didn't go down a narrow road. He would do what he wanted to do and how he wanted to do it.
The man, it was a genius. He could make it wrong.
Like many geniuses, Smokey was a unique personality. No respecter of rank, social standing, or privilege. All Smokey Eunuch respected was a person's honesty and his ability to keep up with them. There weren't many who met those criteria.
I got along fine with him, but he just had a little way about him that nobody else had. And he was a good mechanic, one of the best, besides me.
But when Smokey Eunuch started racing, the sport required unique people. In the late 40s, auto racing was just crawling out of the dirt and mud of county fair horse tracks. It would take men of great skill and vision, and some genuine characters, to create this sport, populate it, and give it its own personality. Smokey Eunuch qualified on all those counts.
He was all about trying to make things work and trying to make things work better.
He was a very, very intelligent person. And he was not always right, but in his mind, he was never wrong.
So strapped in, Smokey's story is one wild ride. We'll jump off where it all
Just in case you
started.
remember, my
The
father
best
took
damn
those
garage
pictures
in
in
town when the
1948.
American muscle car continues. Before the war, racing motorcycles had already earned Eunuch the nickname Smokey. And very soon, a sign with that name on it hung outside Daytona's newest garage at 957 Beach Street on the west bank of the Halifax River. It wasn't long before this place became known as the best damn garage in town. But Smokey's wasn't the only garage in Daytona where hot cars were being built. There was another guy in town, a serious racer named Marshall Teague.
Marshall Teague was a Hudson builder and driver before Smokey. Well, then Marshall, when he wanted to go to Indianapolis completely, he talked Hudson into taking Smokey, and that's how Smokey got started in stock cars.
One of Marshall Teague's young proteges was a racer named Glenn Roberts, who also had a colorful nickname, Fireball. Smokey offered Fireball a place to work on his car, and a relationship formed that, a few years later, would turn the racing world upside down. In 1949, Marshall Teague and his fabulous Hudson Hornet was the class act of Grand National Racing. Its roots were in the good old boy moonshine-running hills of North Georgia and the Carolinas. But on the 4-mile-long beach and road course at Daytona, these races took on a whole new flavor.
Beach was bad. It was a lot of obstacles you had to overcome to win and run good on the beach.
To a competitor like Smokey Unick, though, this kind of racing wasn't intoxicant.
You have these adrenaline junkies that have been released from the war. And they probably, maybe they didn't go in as adrenaline junkies, but the ones that survived were addicted to this high of survival.
Smokey had hooked up with a North Carolina native named Herb Thomas, who had a special gift for making the huge Hudson Hornet do incredible things on a racetrack. Over the next few years, Herb Thomas and Smokey Unick won dozens of races and laid the foundation on which a legend would be built. By the end of the decade, the speed, the popularity, and the cost of racing was exploding, and Smokey Unick was right at ground zero. Stay with us as the whole thing speeds up on the American muscle car. After nearly winning the 1957 beach race with Paul Goldsmith in a Chevy, Smokey's factory-backed 1958 Pontiac took it to the winner's circle. But in 1959, the new 2.5-mile Daytona International Speedway was set to open, and everybody wanted to win the first race at this new megaplex. Pontiac's head man, Bunky Newton, loved Smokey Unick, and nothing would please him more than to have Smokey build the winning car and have Fireball Roberts take it to victory lane. Stay with us as Smokey builds Pontiac into the fastest car in America on the American Muscle Car. By now, Smokey had a reputation for two things: having the fastest engines and searching the rulebook for every competitive advantage. From creating lightweight components to building tunnels inside the car to channel air out from under the hood, an early experiment in ground effects, Smokey left nothing on the table.
But we used to build stuff in the cars so that they'd find it, so that they wouldn't find the stuff that we really wanted, the cheap stuff.
I think at Forrest, even cheap worse than Junior Johnson. That's saying a lot.
By 1962, it all clicked for the super team. Smokey's Pontiac, with Fireball driving, took the trifecta at Daytona, winning the pole position, the qualifying race, and the Daytona 500. And just for good measure, they set a new speed record that would last for nearly a decade. Maybe in another life, Smokey had been an explorer. Perhaps he had a need for adventure left over from World War II. Or maybe it was a hankering to get away from it all. Whatever it was, this urge motivated Smokey Unick to spend a large part of his life on wildcat ventures in the jungles of South America. But when he came home, it was always to throw himself 100% into another racing challenge. No task was more daunting or more enjoyable to Smokey than the Indianapolis 500.
The biggest thing in our lives was Indianapolis because he would be gone for the entire month of May, the last week of April through the first week of June.
Smokey brought every ounce of his intensity to Indy. Through the years, his Indianapolis cars were some of the most forward-leaning designs to ever race at the Brickyard. Obsessed with aerodynamics, Smokey's cars always sported some gimmick or device that was outlandish, unheard of, and brilliant. And as usual, Smokey's cars always had more power.
He was always noted to be, the best as far as working on the engines. He pulled 30 or 40 horsepower more than anybody else, so he always had a car that would run fast.
But in nearly 20 years of trying, the Indy winner's circle had always eluded him, except once. Even though he built and rebuilt the winning car, inexplicably, another person's name appears in the record book as crew chief on Jim Rathman's 1960 winning entry. This oversight was a personal disappointment for Smokey throughout his life. By this time, racing had done several things for Smokey Unick. It had established him as one of the world's most innovative racers. It had made him famous. And by his own estimate, throughout the years, it had paid him a salary of roughly $2 an hour on average for all his time and effort. Mostly, though, the best damn garage in town had become a renowned center of research and development for the internal combustion engine.
He told me once in an interview that he would go through and take the pistons and he'd measure and, finagle, and he'd go through like 100 pistons to find the 8 best out of 100.
Smokey's overpowering curiosity about how things work and how to make things work better led him to build his own dynamometer, his own flow bench, and dozens of other diagnostic instruments for measuring the performance of his engines. Throughout his career, he patented dozens of inventions, from variable ratio power steering and the extended reach spark plug to energy-absorbing barriers at racetracks. Smokey's work with alternative energy sources and new kinds of internal combustion engines earned him honors and accolades from the engineering community. Not bad for a high school dropout.
I think the fact that he didn't have schooling is what led him to do these things, because he didn't have people telling him not to do something, that it wouldn't work.
But in the final analysis, Smokey Unick will be remembered for being a racer, and there's no better evidence of this than his cars. Vic Edelbrock owns a genuine piece of Smokey folklore, his 1968 Camaro Trans Am Racer. He remembers the first time Smokey took the car to the racetrack.
You know, he showed up at Riverside when the car was brand new, towed it all the way across the country with a pickup truck, with a the towing bar, no trailer, street tires on it. He gets to Riverside, car is filthy dirty, so he decides to wash it in the parking lot of the motel, of course using all their towels. He goes over to Goodyear, gets a set of tires and a set of wheels, puts them on. About that time, Lloyd Ruby shows up, and he talks his way out on that racetrack. Didn't get it teched or anything, but he talked his way out on the racetrack during a intermission session or whatever. And here's Penske, here's Bud Moore, and here's the stopwatches going. And he breaks the track record five times in a row, 5 laps in a row. The car comes off, goes right to the back of the pickup truck, off come the wheels and tires, gives it back to Goodyear, puts the street ones on, out of there, and up the bottom of it.
When Vic first acquired the Camaro, he decided to treat the car to a body-off restoration to return it to its full glory. But during the resto, the car provided Vic and his restoration team with a daily dose of laughter and more insight into the Smokey Unick legend.
We took it completely apart, and it was really funny. Mike Eddy would come in every day in my office and start laughing. And I'm saying, what in the world are you laughing about? He said, Vic, every day I tear this car apart, I see stuff in there that you wouldn't believe, and I just start laughing. And that was it, that was the truth. I mean, there were so many things that he did to that car that it was just unbelievable. You know, no stock part would fit it.
Today, Vic Edelbrock and his daughter Cammie race the Camaro in vintage sports car competition, but always with the knowledge that they're driving a special piece of American automotive history.
Everything he did, he put a lot of Smokey in there. He left an awful lot for us in this industry and the stories. You know, so much in the performance business is stories that are really, really good. And a lot of them have Smokey Unick in it. And that way we will never forget the man. The man will be part of us for many years to come.
Smokey Unick died from leukemia on May 9, 2001. There probably won't be a grandstand at the Speedway named for Smokey, or a street in Daytona Beach with his name on it, although there should be.
He said, I know what I did. And I say the industry knows what he did. The industry knows what he contributed to the sport. And we as people hopefully know what he contributed to humanity. But he said, don't make no damn shrine to me.
But in his autobiography, completed just before his death, Smokey said, the only real reward is how you feel about yourself. Everything else is temporary. Considering all he accomplished during his lifetime, certainly no other reward would be adequate. Thanks for watching. See you next time on the American Musclecar.
Thank you for letting me play that. I really appreciate it. It's not released on home video. Funny, I'll throw a quick funny story out for you here. We were putting together the materials for this show and whatnot. I sent a letter to the NASCAR archives over in Daytona requesting a headshot, one picture, if they could possibly provide it, of Big Bill France with Smokey Unick. Well, after about a week, they sent me a letter back saying, I'm sorry, we have no such photograph of Smokey with Mr. France in our archives at all. However, we'll be happy to provide you with an 8x10 glossy headshot of Mr. France for an honorarium of $10,000, one-time use. When you get done, send the picture back. Yes. And I thanked them very politely, and I wrote out a check for $1,000. and sent it to Trish Unick, and as a thank you for all of her hospitality and letting us in. They had never let another camera crew inside Smokey's garage. She said they didn't want people tramping around in there looking for ghosts. But she said, I hear what you guys are trying to do, so you can come in. So I sent her a check for $1,000. She immediately calls me on the phone, and she said, I just tore up your check. I'm sending it back to you. And by the way, screw Bill France. So now we're cruising along. We've got 5 seasons in the can. We're starting to work on our 6th season here. Hello, wrong direction. No, I just wanted you to look at my car again. Hello, there we go. We're starting to work on the 6th season shows, and everything now is starting to change. Now we're getting around 2004, 2005. Speed Channel is starting to change again, and their lineup is starting to trend away from the documentary style shows we do and more towards reality TV, more towards toolbox shows and things like that. Turns out Speed Channel had hired a new director of programming away from MTV.
Oh.
And his resume included things like Jackass and all like that. So I figured that, if we get another season out of these guys, it's gonna be a blessing. So they did. They gave us a 6th season, and we soldiered on, and we really got to push the envelope this time, doing things like the documentary on the birth of Trans Am racing. We did a thing called Bonneville, the genesis of hot rodding. Now, my friends, I am here to tell you that if you ever in life have a chance to go to Bonneville during Speed Weeks, do it. You will come back a changed person. I mean, this is just, I've never been in a situation like this. I mean, it was like, here's these crazy people running 300 miles an hour on the surface of the moon. But they couldn't have been more gracious to us, and they wanted to tell their story too. Also in this program, I got to interview Wally Parks and Alex Zidius on the same set, sitting in front of Mickey Thompson's Challenger at the NHRA Museum in Pomona. And so that's kind of a life achievement for me there. So we also got to do a story on the history of superstock racing, which was a thrill. A program called The Ultras, which talked about cars like that came from Berger Chevrolet and Nicky Chevrolet and Dickie Harrell cars and Don Yenko and people like that, people that would take the best that the factory had to offer and raise the bar a little bit. So, and we also spent an entire afternoon with a brilliant man by the name of Gail Banks, who said, how much tape do you have? And I said, well, we've got a case or two. He says, bring it all into the conference room. And he sat us down, and he went to the chalkboard with a piece of chalk and talked for 4.5 hours on the science of getting air through an engine. And it's just like, and I felt like I climbed the mountain and I got to sit at the foot of the Dalai Lama. It just, if Gail Banks isn't, God, he's one of the apostles for sure. So, well, I will fess up something to you, and I have not told this to anybody before. The only people who know about it are the people that were there. But we did a thing called Bad Boys, where we wanted to take the best muscle car engines of the era and have a dyno shootout with them. And we started calling people. Lamar Walden, the creator of the 409, said, yes, please, come to Doraville. We'll put a 409 on the test stand for you. Rodney Butler invited us up to his Philly. He just happened to have what we called a Dead Nuts Perfect 421 SD, all blueprinted and ready to rock on his dyno. And we found a guy with a tunnel port Ford 427, the ubiquitous big block Chevy, and a guy with a Hemi. And our ground rules to do this show is this, okay, here, what we want to do is stock bore and stroke plus 60 over, no more than that. Just a really good blueprint job, blueprint cam, you maybe cleaned up the heads, everything else, but we want this to be apples to apples. And they said, okay, no problem. And Lamar Walden's 409 came out right on. Rodney's came out about 25% above, but he said that's to be expected the way we build them. And I said, yes, sir. And the Ford was legit, the big block Chevy was legit. So we get to the place where the guy is doing the Hemi and he says, you ready to go? Roll tape. And he pulls back the handle and the thing sailed out to 820 horsepower. At 680 foot-pounds of torque from a stock 426 Hemi. And so, and even the people on the crew that didn't know anything about cars are going, oh, shit. But we could, we couldn't rag on the guy. I mean, he was kind enough to invite us into his place, give us half a day's time and whatnot. So we said, thank you very much. And I had to figure out a way to finesse that in the script. Now, I hear tell that there's a Wikipedia article out there somewhere talking about this particular bad boy show, calling BS on the whole Hemi thing. And I can't disagree with him. But at any rate, we finally got the sixth season in the can, and now it's really looking like it's not going to continue, because we got literally told by the advertisers now that it said that audience that you have been catering to, we don't care about them anymore. They're not buying any Xboxes, and they're not buying any PlayStations. They're not spending a ton of money on games, and apps, and all this other kind of stuff. That's the audience that our advertisers want to reach, and you're not reaching them. Well, okay, you're right. We really weren't, but we were still happy for the time that we got to do things with them. And as a parting shot, as a going out, they allowed us to do the one and only mini-series that Speed had ever commissioned. It was called The Last Stingray, and it's the story of the very last 1967 Corvette to come off the lines. And as you know, 1968, they weren't Stingrays anymore. And when 69, it was Stingray, but it was one word. But this was the very last car that Chevrolet produced that said Stingray, 2 words on it. And we thought it was worthy of a 6-hour mini-series, and so did the network. Okay. Oh, by the way, in the meantime, Speed Channel is changing to Speed, and they're going more NASCAR and away from the kind of smaller shows that we do. But they did let us do The Last Stingray, and I will annoy you with just a bite of it.
No one could have known 4 decades ago that this car, as nice as it was destined for greatness. But now, after 40 years and a couple of lifetimes, The Last Stingray is finally an overnight success.
We like long intros. This is from the last.
By now, just about everyone knows the story of this car. This pearl silver Stingray Coupe, serial number 22940, is the last 1967 Corvette ever made. Just about any other car, that statistic would be a large who cares. But being the last 1967 Corvette is a pretty big deal.
There truly is a piece of history that will impact the entire hobby on many levels, I feel.
Just a year ago, hardly anyone would have given the last Stingray a second look. It was just one more used-up muscle car in the 60s. And most cars in that shape aren't worth what it cost to restore them. It took the vision of one man to see the diamond that still gleamed under this rough fiberglass body, to hear the heartbeat inside an engine that everyone thought was forever dead, and recognize that little bit of magic coded inside the DNA of this car's VIN number. But today, 53 years after that first weird little 6-cylinder runabout in the street, Corvette is still the ultimate dream car. Today's kids dream about having a shiny new Corvette as their first set of wheels, just like their parents did a generation ago.
The Corvette will never be seen as an old man's car. I'd still like to think that Zora is looking down and smiling on us today. We have the C6 out there, and I've got to think that Zora is very happy with what he sees.
The Corvette has always been the kind of car that can turn dreams into reality. Today, over 1.5 million people have grabbed hold of that dream. And there's no better example of that than this car, the Last Stingray, found in a barn, rescued, and brought back to life. It's still a magnet for people with a dream. No doubt the dreamer will show up at the Barrett Jackson collector car auction this January, in love with the Last Stingray, and will make his or her dream come true. Maybe it's you. The rest of us will watch and wish it was us. Thanks for watching.
We just had a wonderful time with that show. Dick Goldstrand was in that show. Bob Bondurant was in that show. A lot of really fun people to talk to. So we were very, very happy with that. But I thought, it's a good way to go out. I mean, that was kind of the last hurrah for the American muscle car. I'd already told the network that after 62 episodes, we're fresh out of muscle cars. And when they started talking about doing a reality show, I think I mentioned to them at a programming meeting that I can't make a show that I wouldn't watch. And so I saw a lot of eyes roll back in programmers' heads when I said that. But I wasn't going to whore out the concept. I wasn't going to start doing shows on the Turbo Corvair. I didn't really want to do a show on the road racing D-darts with the high post slant six. And the network was headlong into reality shows and a younger audience, and it's good for them, and it's very good. But they did give us one shot. They came to us and said, take one stab at doing this thing. It's automotive related, but it's reality. It's called 101 Cars You Must Drive. Would you like to give it a shot? And this is kind of like...
No, ci sono freni.
No brakes.
Freni no,
No brakes.
non ho freni.
No brakes. Why? Why do we need those?
Perché? Vuoi andare, non vuoi fermare.
Now this is no frills. This is nice. Really. So, do I drive?
Guarda, ci sono i venti qui. Sì, questo si chiude.
That's nice. That's good. That works out well. I like that. Compact.
Pacific Coast Highway at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon.
Now, between you and me, there's a little story that they gave one of these to the president of Mexico, and he ran it on tequila. Can you imagine a car that runs on tequila? Why, no, officer, I haven't been drinking, but the car's had a few. Might get you out of trouble now and then.
The host of that show was a guy, he was the second runner-up in America, what was it, The Funniest Comedian, it's called, or The Last Comedian. Remember that show? And the network basically issued him to us like a piece of property and said, okay, here's your host, go make shows. And I never could get really happy with, it finally occurred to me that the reason we have a stand-up comic as the host of a car show is because he wants to make fun of the cars and the owners. And I could never get really thrilled with that, so my heart wasn't totally in it. But the last of one of these shows we did, and I said, thank God it's the last one, we wanted to do a show on off-roading. So we got some Jeeps. We had a guy show up with a Willys Overland. We actually found him from the Willys Owners Club, found him in a place called Sock Choppy, Florida. Anybody know where that is? That's back in the Palmetto Scrub. There's hot and cold running alligators. And but anyway, so this guy shows up with his wife in a really nice looking restored Willys Overland, and I bring him over and introduce him to our comedian Alonzo Bowden, and the guy is horrified and won't shake his hand. And so he and his wife go off over there, and we go over here and get ready with the shots and stuff like that. And there's a loud conversation taking place between this guy and his wife says, "I will not let that man in my car." And it's like, it turns out that this guy is some sort of high official of the local Ku Klux Klan. And he didn't want to do the gig. He wanted to pack up and go home right then. And I had to show him the release form that he had signed and the check that he had already cashed and was canceled, and said, "You're obligated, and besides, I'm on deadline, so can we get this done?" But that was very, very difficult to get all the way through and try to maintain something and keep Alonzo from punching him in the teeth. But we made it through it, thank God. But our show today isn't about that. It's about the American Muscle Car and how much we owe to you, and how much we owe to this club, and how much we owe to guys like this who just showed up and said that they would be on our
More
show.
upscale. The Charger, I guess you could say, was somewhat like a T-Bird in that it was appealing to people of higher income, maybe a little bit more discerning taste, so to speak, to compete in the Trans Am series. And really, that just shows how competitive the pony car marketplace was more than anything else. I think all the manufacturers knew that if you were going to play in the pony car market, then you had to race the cars.
Ford Mustang was really the first time the manufacturer made a small car profitable. And of course, really, profit's what drives everything. That's what makes the dealers push certain cars. Through the Mustang program, the dealers finally saw that they could indeed make money on small cars.
Chevrolet arranged their options very wisely. The first level, entry level, you get the badging and you get the interior trim, but the standard engine was not a real killer. If you wanted to go really fast, you had to get the super sport trim and then buy other options on top of that. And you could work your way up the list to some pretty high horsepower levels. And Mopar was the first one to really identify the market for a low buck, no frills, maximum bang for the buck muscle car.
It had a lot of torque. With two 4-barrel carburetors, it would do 0 to 60 in about 4.5 seconds. It would do the quarter mile in about 12.2 at roughly 115. This is a prepared car. The Chevelle, just like all the other GMA bodies of that era, was really a nicely engineered car, well-balanced car, very attractive, easy to drive, decent weight. You take a 67 GTX, for example, tremendous car, fast car, you know, beautifully executed. They couldn't sell it because it didn't have an image, okay? And marketing and packaging your muscle car, it had to have image.
The Chrysler Corporation in the mid-1950s really invented the muscle car. With the advent of the first Chrysler 300 in 1955, which was followed up by the Plymouth Fury in 1956, the Dodge D500 and the DeSoto Adventurer. These were all very exclusive, one-of-a-kind kind of marketing efforts to promote sophistication and performance and handling, and they were all excellent cars.
Jim Pontiac, dueled in the Bee Factory experimental class with Jim Wangers at number 926 winning.
Jim Wangers was one of those win-on-Sunday Pontiac racers.
With the advent of this new policy from the corporation, here was Pontiac suddenly without a stage on which to put their cars. They were suddenly deprived of this organized racing activity from which a very good backup for some aggressive advertising built around the wide track image was coming. The car that had bowed in 1961 as a real engineering marvel had deteriorated significantly to the point where it was a real troubled car. In 1964, when the new Tempest/Le Mans car came into the marketplace, it was felt that what we needed was not just another nice, not just another good car. What we needed was kind of what we called in the industry an oh my God. In those days, there wasn't an awful lot of real good timing equipment out. Car driver timed the story with handheld stopwatches. And I'm going to be very honest with you, you don't need me to tell you that this car couldn't run 0 to 100 in 11.8 seconds, falling straight off the top of the Empire State Building. But when I saw it in print, I wasn't going to tell them, hey guys, I think that's a little too fast.
And then
So God bless these gentlemen. Two of those guys aren't with us anymore, Tom Shaw and Paul Zazarine. We miss them terribly. I think our entire hobby misses them terribly. The journalism that they did during their careers just really elevated all of our lives. So thank you guys, and I appreciate it a lot. Now, so we're coming to the end of the whole program here, and at the very, very bottom line of it all we ever wanted to do was share the joy of ownership. And I think we certainly tried. I hope we succeeded. It's up to you to tell us whether or not you did. But really, to do that, we had to show you having fun with your cars. And you told our story every week. You told what was going on. You told us why you liked the car, why you were willing to spend uncounted tons of money on it, how much of your time you wanted to spend to bring them back from the dead, making them better than they were when they were brand new. See, I knew this because I learned that from you. I learned all of this stuff from you right out there in the parking lot. And that's what built this entire thing. All of you rubbed off on us, and that's what caused us to be able to make this show. What you have here in this association and in your local clubs, GTOAA, this is precious. This is very special, and I don't think you ought to take it for granted. I promise you, because of what's going on out there in the parking lot and everything else, I will just be willing to bet that all this history, it means something to all of us. is that, you know, where these cars came from, who raced them, who built them, who had something to do with bringing them to market, that was as important to you as what color the engine ought to be, where that little, how that clutch return spring goes on, all that kind of stuff. These cars are more than just, I mean, literally, they're more than just a pile of parts. Each one of them are stories. Bob Riddle's got his eyes focused on the carburetor. And here we are. I have not yet, to this day, found somebody with guts enough to go pound on that indoor equipment. I'm sure there's somebody out there drunk enough to do it. I don't even want to know it. That's Jim Wanger's doing that last part. I just had to throw that little burnout segment in there because as one of the guys at the network came up to me one time and he says, "Do you realize you're the Aaron Spelling of burnouts?" I said, "Thank you, I received that." So anyway, that's our show for tonight. And we thank you for coming in and seeing everything. You know, looking at you guys and looking at all the awesome cars that are here today, and it's clear that all of you, whether you know it or not, you all now have all the time, energy, and resources you need to accomplish all your desires.
Thank you.